What you are about to see is a remote viewing session that was conducted totally blind by the remote viewer. The viewer knew nothing about the target or the nature of the project when doing the session. But I will now tell you what the target is so that you can follow along when the remote viewer is describing the session data. Now, the sessions for this target were all completed by Farsight remote viewers in July 2024. The target for this project is the Israeli war with Hezbollah and its aftermath. In June 2024, it looked like a war with Hezbollah was inevitable, so this project was designed to see what such a war would look like. The target has a number of focuses. The first focus is the most advanced weaponry that Israel will use in its upcoming war with Hezbollah, as the weaponry is actually used in combat. Now, the second focus is the most advanced weaponry that Israel possesses of any type. So the first two focuses involve the types of weapons that might be used in such a war. Now, the remainder of the focuses deal with the actual war itself with respect to the use of those weapons. Focus 3 is the scene that would best describe the final outcome of the Israeli war against Hezbollah. Now, Focus 4 is the scene in Israel that would best describe the final outcome of the Israeli war against Hezbollah. And Focus 5 is the scene in Lebanon that would best describe the final outcome of the Israeli war against Hezbollah. So with these focuses, we are hoping to see what the result of the war will be like in various places, such as in Israel, in Lebanon, and possibly elsewhere. Now, I want to make something very clear. Remote viewing data must be considered speculative until they are verified with respect to solid facts on the ground. So, the data that you are about to see can be interpreted one way, but they may turn out to be something else when all is said and done. The best we can do is to say that the remote viewing data are one viewer's attempt to describe what is perceived, all under blind conditions. So, these data which you are about to see cannot be interpreted at the current time as saying that Israel will definitely resort to using, say, nuclear weapons. Indeed, very large conventional weapons can also cause results that look quite similar to nuclear weapons. Such large conventional weapons were in fact used by the United States during the Vietnam War, which resulted in huge craters across much of Vietnam that are now lakes which are often used for fish farming today. A remote viewer might have difficulty differentiating a large conventional weapon from a nuclear weapon during a remote viewing session, since both would be destructive over a large area. And importantly, it could be that we are wrong about everything. Perhaps the war will not happen, or perhaps it may be short-lived. Perhaps diplomacy will win the day and disaster will be averted. The only thing we are saying is that these are the perceptions that our remote viewers perceived when being tasked with the target of the upcoming war between Israel and Hezbollah. All remote viewers at Farsight are very highly trained in the use of our remote viewing procedures, so the data could be important. Now let's see what one of our remote viewers perceived for this target. All right, so what we have here is deep news. And we have Aziz, you're going to be describing the session that you had for this deep news, and then it's a very interesting project, and you just for the audience's sake, you don't know anything about the project, is that right?
I do not.
And you don't know the target or anything?
Mm-mm.
All right, well, why don't you just go through the session that you got, and then at the end of that, we will tell you what the actual target is for this session. And
sounds good.
So let's just go through it. So I have your paper session in front of me. So why don't we start with your initial perceptions, and then proceed. I guess we start with your initial perceptions on page 4 and 5 and 6, and then march on through.
Sounds good. Okay, so I have multiple visuals on page 4. Basically, I was just getting regular topography, hard base surface, natural mushy base surfaces, water, artificial smells, just a whole bunch of sensations. The first visual just seemed like an indoor environment with multiple subjects. The second visual seemed like a rocky, irregular topography that was near a land-water interface. The third visual was more just a gray-hued urban environment with multiple structures. And then I went on and did a flash sketch, which was more of this rocky mountain-looking structure and a feeling of a land-water interface as well. And then I did another flash sketch and got a long room with multiple subjects inside. Some of them seemed sitting down. So that's pretty much the visuals that dominated the very beginning of the session. But then as I started to move to the center of the target and try to look for perceivable elements, once again, multiple subjects. Some of them seemed to be in maybe sort of a pale-faced, more formal attire looking male subject. And then I started to basically probe for the target event, and I got multiple perceptions that sort of started to flood in, once again probing for the target event. The first perception that I got at focus 1 was this sensation of being inside of a structure, seeing a seated subject, another standing subject, and then this force of energetics just sort of blowing out what I can only assume is a door. And I got the sensation maybe of multiple darker hued subjects coming out of the door as well, but it just seemed like a force of energetics just sort of blasted through the door or the opening of this area. Then I got another perception, which was more of that mountainous topography, but then I started seeing a clear urban area at the base of the mountain or just in a flat area of this irregular topography. And I saw a flash of light sort of boom out in the center of that urban area. And then I just had a third visual, just looked like a couple of subjects like angrily pushing each other or something like that. But then I started to move on to focus 2. And when I was...
Let me interrupt and tell the audience, of course, that there are 5 focuses for this. So you're going to go through one at a time. So now we're going on to focus 2. So focus 1, just to summarize, it seems like explosives and fighting. That's what I get from that so far.
Yeah.
So why don't you go on to focus 2?
Great. So in focus 2, I was basically initially I just picked up just semi-hard, semi-soft base surface elements. Or semi-rough rough and soft base surface elements. Other things felt hard. There were harder objects. I started getting a sensation of lots of vertical objects. I deducted trees or maybe multiple subjects that were just standing up. I felt like I was mixing those two perceptions up a lot, but it felt like I was either indoors or in some canyon or something like that. It just felt like there was this open space or light above me, but I just felt like kind of claustrophobic in this perception, just that there was multiple vertical things just around me. Anyway, I kept moving around focus 2 and moved to a sort of technology that is going to be labeled technology 1. And this was just a large grayish hued room that held technology 1. And technology 1 basically was this... It was like this prone thing, like just like this lying down, large, cylindrical, coned object. I'd say coned because the tip of it clearly had like a cone over it. And I deducted that it was like a missile or like some old first-generation computer or something. There was this big console or something nearby it, and it just felt like it was like attached to it, or it was like some sort of controls or something. Like it just felt like this large gizmo or gadget. And it was like this large technological object, and it felt like there was this big energy inside. I deducted that maybe it was a generator or a bomb or something like that, because it was this like long cylindrical coned object lying down and sort of hooked up to this other console that was quite bulky. But
you also have a deduction tactical nukes and aerospace stuff.
Oh yeah, that was on the next page. Yeah, on the next page I did deduct tactical nuke and aerospace stuff. I got this sense of multiple subjects walking around it, like, and this was another deduction, scientists building a rocket or a big missile. It just felt like I had this sense of this big tube with a cone, and it seemed like this large, and it was large and it was wide, and it had this kind of appearance like it was an airplane without the wings, like just a big Boeing without the wings or anything like that. And it just was attached to a larger apparatus, and that being the sort of controlling console thing. But I get the sense that the main element, the core element of this thing was like it could be moved. Like it wasn't static to this location, and it could basically just be picked up and hooked up to something else. Then within Focus 1 as well, still in Focus 1, I moved to the second technological device thing, Technology 2, I guess. And
this is back to Focus 1. Okay.
Yeah, back to Focus 1. Oh, sorry, not still in Focus 1. Back to Focus 1. So moving back to Focus 1, then I found this other technological device, and this other technological device kind of looked very similar. It was upright, though. So instead of just the previous technological device was like lying down, and it was in this like gunmetal hues, more rustic, large garage warehousey type of environment. This one at Focus 1 is another cylindrical coned object, technological device, except it was upright. It was sticking up, just an upright object. And it was like taller, bigger, and more pointed. Like it seemed like it was arranged to look up like more of like a tower or a mountain. It's just had this central column, and it felt like it had these sort of supporting other devices or structures that were sort of supporting it on the either side. And it felt bigger than the first technology, but it was just not on its side. It was upright, and it still had subjects around it, but the environment felt like it was larger. It felt like it was fancier. It was less rustic, and I still deducted that it was a rocket. It just looks like a rocket, and it just sort of looks like a rocket or a missile poised to launch. And then I deducted nuke again. So I was really sort of grappling with that concept of nukes and rockets. Anyway, Technology 1, if I had to just summarize it, Technology 1 felt like it was a nuke lying horizontally down in a large garage, and it was in a rustic warehouse or large base. And Technology 2 felt like it was in a big, it was like if a big fancy company like Lockheed Martin decided to build like a proper nuclear device, like a proper missile or something, and it was in a fancy, clean, nice, large airplane hangar or aircraft hangar, and it was, or just some other large, spacious environment to sort of make it seem grandiose and clean and professional and stuff like that. So basically, the environments were probably the most striking difference between these two technologies. They both still looked rather similar, though, like cylinders with cones at the end, so rocket shapes. So then I moved to the target event for Focus 1 and tried to describe there, and the target event really just looked like an urban area, and that urban area, basically I was sensing these, well, the first thing I sensed was this large, bright, expanding light that erupted in the middle of that, on one area in that urban area space. And it was right in the middle of the structures. So the fire that burst out of that, it was large, but the actual fiery energetics were nowhere near as large as the expanding wall of cloud dynamics and smoky stuff that wasn't entirely all black. I mean, at first it had a more of a brighter hue, but then it got to be most of it was very black as it started to move up. But it was, it just shot out in all directions, just this clouds of smoke and debris and just tan hues and black hues just expanded out in all directions. And that was way bigger than the actual fiery expanding light of the actual explosive energetics. Anyway, this large amount of smoky energetics just shoot up and expand beyond the light point in all directions. There's this, I deducted shockwaves, but it was like this force and sound combined just boomed outwards in like 360 degrees out in all directions. There was the irregular topography, this urban area, but this shockwave just shot out in all directions, and it really just penetrated the silence of the environment. So
Okay, so what happened when you went to focus 3 on page 17?
yeah, so focus 3 was basically, it just looked like a urban environment with some irregular topography in the backdrop, but the urban environment, half of it was just like this crater almost. I mean, I kind of sensed that there were some structures as well, but the closer they were to this crater thing, the more the structures looked like they were like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, they were just like leaning to the side. And the closer you got to the epicenter of this crater that was basically just made in the middle of this urban area, there was just no structures there. It just, the perimeter had some leaning and dilapidated structures, but the very center just did not seem to have structures anymore. So it seemed like it really just destroyed the place. As I kept going through Focus 3, I basically saw what looked like just an urban area. At first, the environment sort of felt like, I mean, there was this bright light. At first, this environment, it felt indoors, but then it seemed like it was outdoors because there was this big open space. And I'm just seeing this wide open space adjacent to or in the middle of an urban area. And that just seems like that's what the place looks like. So then I moved to Focus 4, though.
Yeah, now you go on to focus 4.
So in Focus 4, I feel like I'm looking at this urban area once again, and some irregular topography in the background, but urban area once again, and just some hills. And it felt like that space that had the crater in it was not a crater anymore. It felt like it was just full of smaller structures. So
Well, you don't know if it's the same location, so it's
yeah, I don't know if it's the same location.
It's just it looks like an urban area with structures that are intact.
Everything is filled out with structures. It's an urban area filled out with structures, and they're all intact. Nothing is, there's no craters, there's no glaring open spaces that were just popped up in the middle of the urban area. It's just an urban area.
Let's go to page 20 where you have focus 5.
Okay, so Focus 5, this looks like a very destroyed, basically I deducted fallout. It just seems like this very, very destroyed post-apocalyptic urban area that seems to be almost completely leveled, but it looks like there are some structures still, but those structures seem like they're perforated, or they're like skeletons of structures. Huge walls are just opened up on the sides of them. It just seems like there's a huge number of craters peppered around an urban area, within an urban area. I mean, it's like the urban area itself, it's like somebody took an ice cream scooper and just scooped out parts of a city and just left like craters where the scoops were taken. But yeah, everything seems pretty grayish hues, this ashy grayish hues. And then I started to move around, and I just saw a whole bunch of rubble and debris all over the place. What looked like maybe was half the body of a subject just sort of thrown out to the side. And other visuals, like I had a second visual that looked kind of like it was just a grid, like graph paper or something like that, but just a grid of what I would imagine an urban area would have been if there were, with the streets moving between the structures, but there were no structures. It's like all the structures that would have been in the grid were just ripped up off the base surface and ground into sand, because the whole place looked quite dusty as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I had the third visual, and it was just sort of focused on the fact that there were a few structures that remained recognizable, but this was more on one side of the urban area that still had a few more of these structures that were still standing. They looked like they were maybe a little taller, but they looked incredibly damaged. They had huge chunks that were missing off the sides of the walls, and just the material was missing. And I deducted Fallout, like Fallout cities from the video game or TV show Fallout. That would have been pretty appropriate to describe the way that this city looked. So,
All right, Aziz, that's your session. So
that's it.
are you ready to hear what the target was?
I'm ready.
Okay, so you can open up in the same folder, you can see the file that's called target.
I see. Okay.
The target is the Israeli war with Hezbollah and its aftermath. So all the evidence now, the war has not started yet, but all the evidence from both the United States and Israel and everyone else seems to suggest that there is going to be a war between Israel and Hezbollah. In addition, Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that he's willing to use unprecedented weapons. Now, they have nuclear weapons, and the only way they would ever use nuclear weapons is if they were faced with what they seem to be a collapse, a loss, meaning the military would lose and Israel would be invaded and the country would come to an end. So it would be a last desperate thing. But that does appear to be a possibility at this point. It looks like the Hamas attack in Israel was designed to trick Israel into attacking Gaza and wearing out the Israeli military in Gaza. And then Hezbollah is apparently coming in second. Looks like this was sort of the way I'm looking at it, this looks like it was a planned thing from the beginning. Wear the Israeli military out in Gaza, use up all of its weaponry and ammunition, and then Hezbollah will attack afterwards. And Hezbollah right now has an enormous number of highly trained fighters and all the weapons that they could possibly want from Iran. And the Iranian military weapons are equal to the Israelis, so that the Iron Dome won't work anymore. So it really looks like Israel's military is in risk of actually losing the war. And so that's why I was sort of saying, well, let's see what happens with the Israeli war with Hezbollah and its aftermath. So that was focus one. And it's 2024 is the target period. And focus one is the most advanced weaponry that Israel will use in its upcoming war with Hezbollah, as the weaponry is actually used in combat. The time is the moment when Israel deploys the most advanced weaponry against Hezbollah. And the event is the first use of the most advanced Israeli weaponry against Hezbollah. So based on your session, it looks like they actually may bring out the nukes. It looks like this may be a all or nothing type of event. Anyway, focus two is, I just wanted to know what the most advanced weaponry that Israel possesses of any type is. And your focus two seems to suggest nukes on missiles is the most advanced that it has. So I was wondering if they had anything extra, like UFO type reverse engineered craft or anything like that, but it seems like their most advanced weaponry is simply missiles and nukes. And focus three is the scene that would best describe the final outcome of the Israeli war against Hezbollah. And then you describe what looks like the aftermath of a small nuclear detonation. That's what it looks like for me on your paper session. Now, focus four is the scene in Israel. The scene in Israel that would best describe the final outcome of the Israeli war against Hezbollah. And in your session, you have focus four being an urban area that's still intact. So there's no ruins. And finally, focus five is the scene in Lebanon that would best describe the outcome of the Israeli war against Hezbollah. And that's focus five. And there you have what looks like nuclear Armageddon, meaning the buildings are gone.
Yeah, well, it looks kind of just like how Gaza looks right now.
Yeah, it looks like what Gaza looks like right now. Anyway, that's what the target is. You have any thoughts?
Oh, no, it's pretty fascinating seeing all this. It's I wouldn't jump to conclusions and just say it's all the rockets that I described were actually nukes. It's I'm sure there's a huge spectrum of exploding cone-shaped objects that humans have invented.
That could be weak, but you did use the word nukes in describing your data.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of explosive energetics that comes out of cylindrical cone-shaped objects. But yeah, no, I did use the word nuke, but it's let's see what actually ends up happening with this type of stuff. I mean, my stance is that intelligence agencies don't actually work for the countries that they come from. They work for a secret country that lives underground. That's a bunch of breakaway humans that work with aliens, basically. But the whether or not these people are actually being tricked into stuff, I would definitely say that the amount of compartmentalized tricking that comes between intelligence assets and sort of just trickles down to military operations that we see in the mainstream media is probably a lot. There's probably a lot of trickery that goes on there. So it's this definitely is a war that people say is going to happen. So let's see what happens in real life.
One of my concerns is that this session, that the way the world events seem to be rushing forward, is I'm worried that the war that does appear that it's going to happen, I'm worried that the war might happen before we publish this thing. So I may end up trying to publish this one sooner rather than later, just so people can see what's going on. But nonetheless, we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. If they're not nukes, they're very big bombs.
They're big bombs. Big bombs on cylinder cones, and they shoot into the sky somehow.
Really big ones, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Aziz. Well, that's what we have here. So we can only say that I think you did an amazing job, and we go on to the next one.
On to the next one. Sounds great. Thanks.